This is Group 2. Our group had the privilege of working with Texarkana Resources for the Disabled. This organization was established in 1968 and currently has 2 physical locations. Their Ross Parker Work Center location is at 3015 East 19th Street on the Arkansas side. Their second location, known as Haven Home, which is an assisted living facility, is at 940 Pecan Street, also on the Arkansas side. In 1991, this organization was granted their 501c3 nonprofit status. They consolidated their board of directors over the 2 locations, and now they are housed under one single board of directors. One of the things that makes Texarkana Resources for the Disabled what it is their current values. They also have listed on their website. They are shown there as being people first, compassion, respect for the person served, empowerment, person-centered, integrity, choice, and community.
Texarkana Resources for the Disabled serves people with disabilities in both the Texarkana, Arkansas, and Texarkana, Texas area. So how many people have disabilities in the United States? Well, Cornell University prepares a disability status report, which reports the amount of people with mental and physical disabilities and the impact that having a disability has both socially and economically. Over 12.6% of the nation has some type of mental or physical disability. If we hone it down to the type of disabilities that Texarkana Resources for the Disabled serves, we see that 5.1 have a cognitive disability. This is a disability that presents in having difficulty concentrating or making decisions. 2.7% of the population have a self-care disability. These are disabilities where the person cannot dress themselves or bathe themselves. And 5.6 have an independent living disability. These are disabilities that make it difficult to perform basic errands such as grocery shopping or going to the doctor's office. If we look at the states in the service area, we see that Arkansas has a higher than national average rate of disabilities at 15.9%. Texas has a lower than the overall national average rate of 10%, but due to the sheer size of Texas, it's still a considerable population. According to the 2010 census, over 95% of Texarkana, Arkansas is either African American or Caucasian. African Americans have the second highest prevalence rate of disabilities in the nation. Only Native Americans have a higher rate. And Caucasians have the third highest prevalence rate in the nation. The Disability Status Report also highlights the disadvantages that those with disabilities have in the job market. The employment rate for someone without a disability is 78.3%. However, if you have some type of disability, either physical or mental, it's less than half that, at 35.2%. If you have some type of developmental disability, such as a cognitive disability, you can expect to have an employment rate of only 20.2%. The data shows that the disabled earn less than the non-disabled as well. The median annual earnings for somebody who is not disabled is $45,100. However, if you have a disability, that rate is only $40,100. And if you have a developmental disability, such as a cognitive disability, your median annual earnings is only $33,200. In March 2017, President Trump presented his 2017 budget blueprint. In it, we see large increases to the Department of Defense, but also see large budget cuts to the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Department of Labor. This could negatively impact Texarkana Resources for the Disabled through the effect that it could have on Medicaid. The Department of Health and Human Services is a parent of Medicaid, and Texarkana Resources for the Disabled relies on Medicaid for the majority of its funding. The primary competition for Texarkana Resources for the Disabled is Opportunities Incorporated. It has more facilities and newer facilities, such as the Dorothy Sue Patterson Therapy Center and the Senior Center. It has a more prominent location located on State Line, which gets a lot of traffic. It has a much more visual marketing strategy. Their opportunities incorporated signage as you enter Texarkana, and their vehicles have the opportunities incorporated logo emblazoned all over them.
Our analysis of the resources at our organization starts with human resources. Our organization is led by the Executive Director, Jennifer Harris. The organization has 22 employees who are split between Ross Parker Training Center and Haven Home. Jennifer Harris reports to the Board of Directors. At the next tier of the organization are 4 managers and a compliance officer who report to the Executive Director. The rest of the organizational structure resides under 3 managers. 3 employees report to the business manager, 3 to the program coordinator, 6 to the residential manager, and the rest, including the community employment staff, report to the vocational coordinator. According to the Executive Director, Jennifer Harris, the organizational structure suits their mission.
Texarkana Resources for the Disabled has 3 main sources of revenue. First and foremost is state and federal funding. This comes in the form of Arkansas Medicaid directly and Texas Medicaid indirectly. Texarkana Resources for the Disabled is unable to directly bill Texas Medicaid, but receives funding through Texas Medicaid through working agreements with local contractors. Speaking of contracts, that's the second source of revenue that Texarkana Resources for the Disabled has. They can take many forms, including building components for manufacturing companies like Impact. Third is donations and fundraising. Donations and fundraising are critical for any nonprofit organization, and Texarkana Resources for the Disabled is no stranger. They are trying to increase this line of revenue in the future. Texarkana Resources for the Disabled has its headquarters at the Ross Parker Training Center. In addition to serving the needs of administration, it is also where the vocational and pre-vocational programming takes place. It has 4,000 square feet of area for production, such as making components for manufacturing contracts. Additionally, they also have Haven Home. Haven Home provides housing to those with developmental disabilities and also provides independent living programming to provide independent living skills. Texarkana Resources for the Disabled has several pieces of equipment to help fulfill its mission. Most of the equipment, however, is actually owned by partner agencies rather than Texarkana Resources for the Disabled itself. The primary asset that the organization has is the forklift. The forklift is capable of lifting over 3,000 pounds and is often used in contract labor. The organization also has a variety of functional equipment such as fax machines, copiers, and computers. The computers in the programming labs are a bit on the older side as they are mostly donations. The software that the organization uses, the billing and case management software, is also on the older side and desperately needs an upgrade. Texarkana Resources for the Disabled have several services they provide. Pre-vocational programming provides basic life skill training, such as money and time management. Vocational programming is aimed at getting program participants in the workforce in some capacity. This kind of programming can take many forms. It can be in the form of developing cognitive skills, such as taking instruction, to actually working in the Ross Parker Training Center building components for a contracted business partner. Supported employment goes outside the Ross Parker Training Center and works to place program participants in the workplace environments in the community. Through their Haven Home facility, the company offers supported living programming as well as offering residence to participants. It helps the company as multiple service lines, as a complete dependence on one or the other would be risky. For example, manufacturing companies often go through ebbs and flows of production, and as their demand for production wanes, it means less work for the participants of the vocational service lines.
Assumptions about our organization are that funding will remain the same, that legislation will not be cut, and that United Way funding will not be cut. The annual budget is approved each year in May, and assumptions have to be made based on funding for the prior year. The criteria for our organization is set as follows. Federal law sets requirements to be in the program. An individual must be at least 24 years old and have mental health and physical disabilities. To reside at Haven Home, the individual must be a minimum of 18 years old and have developmental disabilities. Individual plans and goals are evaluated monthly. These are reviewed annually to ensure that the individual is making progress and that the individual is being held. Jobs require a bachelor's degree for some employees. For those that are not required to have a degree, they are required to pass an annual test. The mission statement for Texarkana Resources for the Disabled is as follows: providing training and support that will enable persons with disabilities to reach their highest potential in the community. This mission statement is reviewed annually, and at this time we do not feel any changes are needed to the mission statement.
In collaboration with the executive director of this organization, our group has established 2 objectives and goals to support them. The first objective is to expand their fundraising and their privatized events for donations. They can accomplish this by having 2 large annual events and 10 smaller monthly events. The second objective we've established for this organization is to expand the supported employment services segment. This can be accomplished by increasing community education about this service and eventually transitioning this segment to be the primary focus of the organization. Our recommendation for strategic implementation of this organization's objectives and goals is to increase their community visibility and involvement. We also recommend they hire a community outreach coordinator to increase their sources of localized funding. Our last recommendation is for the organization to expand their use of social media for event marketing. Looking further, we as a group recommend a 3-year plan. During the first year, Texarkana Resources for the Disabled should hire a community outreach coordinator and increase localized fundraising by 4 to 5 events. During the second year, the coordinator should be fully acclimated and trained to their new position. By year 3, the organization should have placed at least 15 people in a supported employment role.
Implementation of the long-range plan starts with alternating the monthly fundraisers. This month, the fundraiser will be held at Painting with a Twist on April 27th. The following month will be an event at a restaurant that donates a portion of their profits, and hiring a community outreach coordinator and finding a place to house that employee. Finally, adding a second large annual fundraiser, and our recommendation was to do a pancake breakfast at Applebee's that could generate up to $2,000. Appraisal of results and recycling of the planning process begins with reviewing quarterly to see if strategic goals are being met. Community Outreach Coordinator will review fundraising monthly, and any state or federal funding changes will be reviewed within 30 days.